The number of the day. Who could ask for more? The number of the day is 4.
So that's the number. Yes, that's the number. That's the number. The number of the day. That's the number. That's the number of the day.
Hello and welcome to the Brick Pit. This is the podcast you didn't know you didn't need. And I'm Adam. Joining me today is our intrepid co-host, Josh. Welcome to the show.
Do you think if you keep saying it, it'll eventually be funny? It's like a British comedy show?
What do you mean eventually be funny? This is comedy gold, my friend. I get a royalty check.
This is number wang. Eventually it lands.
The intrepid co-host who started the podcast in the jungles of South America.
Yeah.
Werner Hartzog should do our intro. From the deepest, darkest regions of the South, the podcaster puts on his microphone.
The khaki shirt. The walking stick in hand. Also, as per usual, is our good friend and also regular co-host Jason, and
Less intrepid,
but much more reliable. So that
much more of an expedition, just a lot of storage space, and
he's the financier of the expedition,
which is why you're both gonna die of starvation.
He's double-crossed us.
He is the only man I know in real life who wears a monocle, so that's...
And there was that whole Cross of Coronado business several years ago.
That's hardly worth speaking about, honestly.
I did get all my trademark weapon and scars on that adventure, though.
All in one fell swoop.
All in the span of an afternoon. It was weird. Hell of a day. I became afraid of snakes that day.
Yeah. And, you know, what was really important is you also were taught the meaning of counting in foreign languages to slow yourself down. A lesson that became much, much more important later in life, you know. So,
do you know in Latin, Jehovah begins with an I?
I think the more important lesson he learned was not to take too long on useless jokes before making the audience
obviously
stop the
not,
podcast.
because I got 5 more minutes of this.
this is the show. These are the jokes.
That's what I learned. Adam talked in his sleep.
That's right. Well, as it turns out, we've made it another trip around the sun. We are now in our 4th year of doing this show. 4 is a good and auspicious number for us and for you. And last year at this time, 3 was the magic number. We did an episode for the start of the year where we looked at trios and movies that ended in years with 3. I had a great time doing that. Josh and Jason less so, but that's okay. We decided to continue it anyway and look at movies that have some nexus to the number 4.
I think Josh and I decided that we'd have probably had a better time without you. Like
fair, yeah,
that's
right.
The 3 that didn't make any.
I often think about that time, like after you gave birth and you were gone on paternity leave. We had all the guest hosts and stuff. That was a great time of the podcast.
It was.
I'll be honest with you. It was a good time for me too. So
that was the golden era.
Those were the best of days. Whenever when we miss an episode.
The silver age now. So
well, they caught us on the way up. They can catch us on the way down too. That's the way. We are the lesser of the Baldwin brothers now. So.
The sad fact is the climb up wasn't too high. And therefore the fall won't be
I don't know. We probably made it to Billy Baldwin status.
We didn't make it to Adam Baldwin status.
No.
Baldwin.
Francisco Baldwin, the lost cousin. He was in that commercial for Pepsodent.
You're going to say he was a lucha libre for years with that name.
Well, anyway, lots of movies I think that are interesting that we've already covered that came out in years that started with 4, or it had 4 in them that we're not going to talk about because we've already done ad nauseum. But Pulp Fiction, The Terminator, Shawshank Redemption, Karate Kid, all have been covered in other episodes. And the reason that I know they ended with 4 is because I was doing a lot of research looking for great movies, and I was like, oh, that's a good movie. We should do that. And then I was like, crap. We've already covered that. I suspect the longer we do this, we're going to run into that little issue more frequently. I think we've talked about every movie ever made at this point. So
if only they made new movies.
We don't watch new movies. Why would we do that?
84 and 94 were
baller years.
Big years. Look at it like 94. Like I think I was 17 in 94. I was
Could you not do the math?
No. Dude, I'm old enough to where I don't want to do the math. I was still in high school, and it was like
you ain't got enough fingers and toes.
Yeah. And all those great films came out. It's like, we lucked out, because it was one of those formative years, and it wasn't like a year full of, Tremors 3 or something.
Tremors 3 is a great movie.
I mean, but compared to Pulp Fiction,
Yeah, that's fair. 94, 84 was a great time.
54 was a really good year, too.
That's what if you may remember, for those of you who are keeping track at home, I think last year I limited it to, was it 83, 93, and 2003, I think I tried to keep it within that bucket.
Some arbitrary
stupid thing. This year I was like, screw that. Let's just open up the floodgates, anything that has a 4 in it. I was hoping somebody was going to do like Star Trek 4 or something like that, but that's okay.
That one is officially called The One with the Whales.
The one with the whales.
It doesn't have a number attached to it.
The thing that I thought was interesting is by kind of expanding the aperture there a little bit and looking outside of what I discovered movies that I had forgotten about too specifically. And I was going to do Dial M for Murder, which I think that was 1954, which is a fantastic movie, but I haven't seen it recently enough to really talk about it. But I only mention it in passing here because it is a good movie that hopefully one day we'll talk about. But going all the way back, so 100 years ago this month, a Buster Keaton movie, Sherlock Jr., came out. It was filmed in January and released that same year. And it took 4 weeks.
I think we may have talked about that or talked about it on Hate Box or something, because
I know we've talked about the general.
Yeah. I think we've talked about Buster Keaton several times, but Sherlock Jr. is actually one of my favorite Buster Keaton. It's one of the shorter, not that they're all very long, but it's fairly short,
minutes.
Maybe. Yeah. It's a very good example if you want to show somebody what Keaton was all about in the layering of jokes and the building on top of each other. Like there's a bit where he's tailing a guy because he read a book on how to be a private eye. And he's like walking like half a step behind him, and the guy's smoking a cigarette, and he drops the cigarette, and Buster like picks it up like without missing a step and starts smoking it. And it just looks, it's pure physical comedy, like just refined. It's just perfect.
You're the ones that really have kind of the history of like understanding the importance of things and technique and whatnot. So I'll mention some stuff, and I'm hoping that one or both of you will jump in. But obviously, it is very short. It's in the public domain. You can watch it on YouTube. You can see it with different takes on it. It was a silent film. To Josh's point about its importance, it has always been on like every list of 100 best movies ever made. It consistently is like 100 best comedies of the 20th century. Like it's just all these accolades. By way, just a quick example, it was 62nd on AFI's list of best 100 best laughs of the 20th century. It ranked 44th on BBC's greatest American films ever made. It's an important film. It's like a filmmaker's film. But it introduced for the first time, or maybe not introduced, but was one of the earliest examples of all kinds of new filming techniques. One of the things that they mentioned was it was the use of the in-camera effects and in-camera tricks and optical effects. The most important one, and Josh, if you're familiar with them, is the trick shot where he jumps into a small suitcase and disappears. Mm-hmm. In different articles I read about this, it mentioned that in many of the screenings of the show, the audience gasped, which is that's quaint to me. That's
well, if you watch it, it's still a fantastic effect. It works really well, and I mean, like Jason and I have likened Buster Keaton to like the prototype Jackie Chan. It's very physical, very environmentally based comedy.
He broke his neck on this film. This is the one. So if anyone's
water comes down,
the water.
He's on the train. Yeah. The pressure was so hard it thrust him down off the train into the ground, and he just got up and finished.
In every film. It's like, they're like, because in our hospitality, he's swept away in this river, and he's got like a rope or something tied to him, and the rope breaks, and he goes over a waterfall, which he wasn't supposed to. And he's like, "Oh, I almost died." Like, great, that's a great movie, Buster.
Let's do it again.
But
it's not just him; it's everybody at that time. Even Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd lost fingers. Unfortunately, it wasn't even during filming. Like somebody during a promotional thing handed him something. He thought it was a prop bomb. Turned out it was an actual firework and blew off his fingers.
Ow.
Yeah, but he still had like a career. If you look, you could tell the movie's made after that because he's wearing a glove.
Jeez.
But I mean, that's the one where, I mean, after that he scales the building that is used, and probably his most famous trick is Safety Last, where he climbs up the clock tower. And he's not actually up in the air, but he's still up in the air pretty far away. That's a camera trick, but still, I mean, he climbs the sides of buildings. He does all these marvelous things because they didn't have as many practical effects back then. Right. And they actually had to do those things. And there wasn't a class of people called stunt people.
You just did it. Yeah. It was the people who.
Well, I mean, out of the three big silent comedians, I mean, there's Harold Lloyd, Charlie Chaplin, and Buster Keaton. Like I'm a Buster Keaton guy. And for a weird reason, it's one of those things like, the meme going around like, men think a lot about the Roman Empire. Like men have a favorite silent comedian,
silent film actor.
It's like, because like it's like if I meet a Charlie Chaplin person, I'm like, get out of here, you commie. Like,
I was really bummed to know that Jason's a Fatty Arbuckle guy. That's his.
It's like Fatty Arbuckle off screen. Like. He's a real fan of his life outside of
his work in the bedroom.
Adam, I will not allow you to slander me like this. I'm a John Arbuckle fan. Garfield comic strips are
He reads Garfield minus Garfield exclusively. We're just so down the rabbit hole.
A couple other interesting things about this was it was the first use of the slipping on a banana peel bit, which is, I mean, that that's a standard, right? And this is where that was invented. It was in this film. It
was probably the first filmed version.
Right. I'm sure that was
a vaudeville.
Yeah,
that's where those people came from. Is Keaton and Chaplin especially were famous vaudeville actors that were transitioning to the film industry.
Keaton's family was a vaudeville act. That's where he got the nickname Stone Face.
But but they were saying like, he's been in vaudeville his entire life. That like one of the earliest bits he did is his father would pick him up by his ankles, dump his head in a bucket, and then mop the stage floor with it.
Yeah.
And they found that if he didn't react, that it got better laughs. And so he trained himself to be in these ridiculous situations and have this totally blank face.
Affect, yeah.
I think we've mentioned before, but I think it's still necessary to point out that Keaton still had a very successful career up until right before he passed away.
Yeah.
And I believe the early 70s. In the 30s, he was taking his old gags and reusing them, like reforming them for other comedians. I believe he worked on A Night at the Opera. And so he reworked a lot of his old gags, like the high wire stuff gags for like Harpo. He apparently was not a fan of the Marx Brothers and their anarchic comedy.
That's interesting. I mean, hell, it is.
It's just the way you said that. No,
that was a very Josh way of saying it.
Josh was standing in for all the women listeners who were riding around with their husbands in the car. That was interesting. Not to be a stereotype, but
that's our wives. When we listen to our own podcast
that's actually
in the car.
You did channel. Yeah, you did channel your wife there a little bit. So
are you riding in the car listening to our podcast with my wife?
That's interesting too.
Less so.
The last point I wanted to make on this was it was an early example of doing the film within the film. A lot of the surrealists like Dolly loved this idea of like a dream within a dream, a film within a film, because he leaps into the screen from the audience. If anyone's listening to this, if you have a chance to just Google that part.
That's a bit that has been homaged, aka ripped off.
Yeah. But the way he did it is the first, or one of the first. It was so, like as a practical effect, it really holds up even now. And so like, if you read about this, it mentions that the way they did that is they used, because there's a series of vignettes that occur that are scene changes within sort of where he's at. Like the classic example is he's sitting down on a bench, but the bench disappears and now he's somewhere else. They used surveyor's equipment to map the position on the camera at the exact right distances to do like the level of detail they went to make sure that the bit worked. It's just really cool. And the last thing I'll say,
that's a Keaton.
The
that staple.
Yeah.
He was very dedicated on the craft of both comedy and filmmaking. As we've mentioned before, I think that's what puts him above Chaplin. Chaplin understood the use of film as a social, a motivator to change social concepts and preconception. And Keaton understood, though, the technical aspects of it and how to bring forth all these new imaginative ideas.
As a filmmaker, that's actually a good segue for the last thing I was going to say, which was I'll just quote directly from this. It said the editing was so difficult and took longer than typical for a Keaton film, which he later told the film historian Kevin Brownlow, quote, every cameraman in the business went to see that picture more than once, just trying to figure out how the hell we did some of that stuff. And I have no doubt that's true, right? Even today, as somebody who doesn't have a training or the eye for this, I was like, wow, that's really cool that he was able to pull that off. So 100 years old, which I think is also kind of cool. Like it's amazing that we're only 100 years into this medium, really, slightly more, but it's how fast technology changes, how fast storytelling on screen changes.
And it's amazing that the art form peaked with, young Einstein. Yeah.
That joke took way too long for you to get to.
Take two. Come with a better bit.
Cut out the pauses.
No.
But Police Academy 4 was when it bit. That was when it peaked.
Actually, that was an 1984 film I almost brought up, Citizens on Patrol. Which is notable for two things. It was like they made like 5 police academies in the span of 2 years or something. Like they just cranked those suckers out.
Got to make that money.
Man, I was obsessed with them. And Citizen on Patrol is like, as a kid, I really liked it because all the beat upon citizens and Bobcat Goldthwait,
cartoony at that point.
Bobcat Goldthwait becomes one of the cops instead of one of the bad guys. And it was the first time I remember that there was the hip hop song tie-in to the movie.
I don't remember that at all. That's funny.
Citizens on Patrol. It's awful, and it's like it's lampooned in I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker, but it's
okay.
Where he has his own theme song. But yeah, there was that. Honestly, it's the first time I ever remember there being and that became a staple of 80s cinema, as having the kind of hip hop theme song that would play at the end, like, the city's burning, people are like dead and crying and all stuff. Like, Kid and Play would come out and start dancing.
Which one of it was the Nightmare on Elm Street movies? Like the Fat Boys did a video for.
Oh, that's right. I want to say that was Dream Warriors. No, because Dokken did like. God, that's a whole other episode.
Yeah.
We'll do that this year sometime because I've got to talk about the Dream Warrior song.
Well, Jason, why don't you tee us up one here?
Okay, actually, I want to go ahead and because we never know how this is all going to work out on time, I want to make sure to get these two movies in.
Okay,
and the reason is they not directly, but there is a bit of interconnection between these two movies that Josh will most likely be reminded of as I tell the story. These two movies are responsible for a friend of ours' wife deciding to never watch movies with us ever again. The first one is the 1994 John Carpenter masterpiece, In the Mouth of Madness.
This one will drive you absolutely mad.
The riots began because the stores could not meet the demands of Sutter Kane's novel, In the Mouth of Madness.
Kane disappeared 2 months ago without a trace.
You're the guy that writes horror books.
You can forget about Stephen King. Kane outsells them all. I need to know if he's alive or dead, and I need that book.
It's a setup. I just have to work out how it's set up.
Kane's writing has been known to have an effect on his readers.
See this? It's a map.
This whole thing has been staged.
You just get out.
This is not reality.
It's all happening for real, Trent.
I know this book will drive people crazy.
Well, let's hope so. The movie comes out next month.
Which I saw for the first time last night.
And it was amazing, was it not?
It was a good film. I rented it on Apple Plus because that's the place I found it, and I had it on my surround sound and all this other stuff. Something weird was going on with the audio encoding when the movie came on. The first segment of that movie is in the insane asylum. The first 5 or 6 minutes. It's In the Mouth of Madness. I've never seen it. I don't know what to expect. I have closed captions on because that's the default. I haven't turned them off yet. I can hear the music track. I can hear the shuffling of papers on the desk. There is no spoken word. It's all captions. And I was like, this is very avant-garde. This is wild. Like, I was like, this is mad. What is going on here? And so I watched it for like 6 or 7 minutes like that. Then I began to think, has Jason pulled a prank on me? He sent me, and then I paused it, reset everything, and then it worked. Right, there was something going on. But
well, I wanted to tell the listeners about like on our text chat. Adam was like, "Oh, I don't have time to I don't remember Italian for Murder. I want to watch one of y'all's films." What we get? Jason's like watching The Mouth of Madness. I go to bed and like midnight, phone starts blowing up, and it just says, "So that was a horror movie," and it's like,
I didn't. Well, when it cold, right? I didn't want to like spoil the fun, right?
It was John Carpenter.
Well,
it's called In the Mouth of Madness.
He confused the mad to be like a comedy mad, like it's a mad world. I know I used that in the text, but that's too good of a joke to pass.
It was. I didn't know if it was going to be like, Big Trouble in Little China, or if it was going to be like The Thing, or right, like because it's across the gambit with him, and somehow I've missed this movie. I never heard of it.
This film was like honestly. It kind of bookends what we talked about our favorite foreign language films.
Yeah.
To me, there's scenes where you're watching somebody watching a movie.
Yeah.
I'll make this quick. I don't know if I've told the story before, but it's relevant because this is why this is probably my most impactful viewing experience of a film ever. So this came out when I was in high school. I had a friend that worked at the movie theater in the mall, and he was trying to hook up with this girl that he worked with. I don't know how I figured into that plan, but he's like, come and watch this movie, like, cause they had to run the movie at midnight, make sure it was like,
Thursday night.
I was doing their job for them while they did whatever. So I went into it cold. I also, like, due to experiences outside of that, where it was kind of skittish psychologically at the point, like where I was experiencing some mild dissociation and stuff that would carry through from this point forward for quite some time. So I go into this movie cold. It's midnight in this movie theater. I'm the only person in there. And it's all about losing your mind and freaking out. And I'm like, oh my God.
And being in the story. That's important, I think.
Right. And I'm like, it's like freaking me out hardcore. And then it ends with Sam Neill like losing his mind. He's the only person in the movie theater. And I was like, oh, this is so I'm done and they're gone. Like there's just nobody in the movie theater. I was parked on the other side of the mall because I worked in the food court. So I walked through the mall at like 2 or 3 in the morning, completely empty, all the lights out and stuff. And I was like, I'm not going to make it. And I was just like, I was literally terrified to my bones. And like years later, I'm like, man, that was awesome. Like
that is, well, I will say like that is an experience. Like when you're in some place that is usually very loud and crowded and you're the only one in there, like that turns something in your brain that just, because I worked at a grocery store and I closed up one night. So I'm the last person there. Everybody else is gone. I go and I'm like shutting off the lights and the music and all that kind of stuff. And then you start hearing the things that all the other sounds cover up. And it's dark, and you're like, "Wait, what's that?" That's the compressor on the frozen food freezer coming in. And also at the time, they had the coupon dispensers on the aisles, and they would beep. And sometimes, for like no reason, they would shoot out coupons. Yeah, so you say beep beep. It's like what else? And it just echoes in an empty store, man. It's so.
Had a similar experience. That's funny.
Yeah.
So it's one of those. That's why I love movies so much, because like I to this day, like when I watch a film, it's like I lose. It's like when I'm reading a book, I lose myself into it. So like venue matters, and honest to God, this movie terrified me at 17 years old, and venue mattered. And even though I was terrified at the time, I look back on it, I was like, man, what I was alive. Like,
so last night was a really good, perfect storm to watch this for me for the first time. I'm too old and jaded to be like scared, but I don't watch horror movies a lot. I've reached a stage in my life where horror movies don't. I think you get an age where you either enjoy them because of the way they make you feel, or you don't enjoy them because
of the way they make you feel.
Because you don't feel anything, which is worse. or because of the way, or they truly scare you, right? Like you're just dead. Like this should have made me scared, and I felt nothing. You know,
watching Saw, just like whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so family's all in bed. I had a strong drink. I sit down. I go down to the basement. So a couple things happen. That weird start to it, where it's just the shuffling of the papers and the music, that actually put me in a mood. I was like, "This is really weird." So I got up, used the bathroom, whatever. And then, as it turns out, for reasons that are too complicated to explain, it got very, very cold in my basement. It's chilly here, and it was like 61 degrees in the basement, and I kept putting blankets on. And as the movie progressed, I kept getting colder and colder. And so by the end, I was actually shivering watching the end of this movie as that guy's in the bathrobe on so I had a kind of a very visceral experience too, get climbing the stairs out of the basement. Yeah. But nobody does monsters like Carpenter in the 80s.
No. This is early 90s, but it's
or 90s.
Yeah. This is it's a leap beyond the other stuff he's done. Mm-hmm. Like this is so metatextual, and it's so like just almost
smart.
The flow of thought and everything, just the way everything goes, and it's at the same time like a tribute to H.P. Lovecraft and that cosmic horror and the meaning of madness, and almost like Lovecraft and Philip K. Dick, like intertwined in a way.
Well, Stas, If that's what you saw, then I guess it would be a little unsettling. I'd be a little unnerved myself. But regardless of what you saw, regardless of what you think, we are not living inside a Sutter Kane story.
They're all in here.
The Mrs. Pickman in the book is a lunatic who chops her husband into coleslaw. And that sweet old thing that we met downstairs isn't capable of anything worse than dipping her dentures into her husband's beer.
Trent, I know you think this is a joke. Just listen to me for a second, please. What if Kane's work isn't fiction?
For Christ's sake. This is reality. You hear that? Reality. Now, if what you're saying is true, there should be, out that window, a black Byzantine church with 250-foot spires with gold onions on the top. Now look. You see? Reality.
You didn't read closely enough. The view was from the east.
It was postmodern early, like this and A New Nightmare, which came out around the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another movie that, like, because I was going through these things kind of psychologically, spooked the hell out of me. Anytime I was like, no, it's real. You're like, oh, my God, is it? Movie, is it real? And now it's kind of, it's really a trope now, and it's really overplayed. But like when Carpenter did it, it was cutting edge.
It has that Carpenter wit to it, because that beginning scene where it's Sam Neill, like you don't know what's going on. He's just like fighting the orderlies in the asylum, and he kicks a guy in the groin, and they lock him in the pad cell. I still remember, and it makes me laugh to this day, just Sam Neill like trying to yell, asking them to get out. It's like, I'm sorry about your ball.
that opening scene is so perfect because it's like when they're playing the Carpenters over the. And he's like, not the Carpenters.
So that's all I could hear. When this I could see his mouth moving and I could see the music, but I couldn't. There was no dialogue. It was the weirdest thing.
John Glover he's in that film for like maybe 3 minutes.
Yeah,
and it is like just a tour de force. Like he put everything because he's like the head of the insane asylum, and then he's like, did he ask for anything? Unique, like a single black crayon, and they walk in. It's like drawing crosses everywhere and all over his body. It's like, oh god, just a perfect.
But it's a great cast, Sam Neill,
Charlton Heston.
Heston's in it. David Warner, Jurgen Prochnow as the character Sutter Kane, who's kind of the linchpin on this whole. I don't want to get away because it's such a great movie to experience.
Yeah.
But like I said, this was a movie that our friend came over and he had at that time his girlfriend with him. And it's like, we're going to watch a movie. And this is the movie we watched. And I remember, and it's another one of my favorite bits in it that just kind of got her. And it's Jurgen Prochnow as Sutter Kane. Like he's given Sam Neill this, like, essentially a command to like go back and take his latest novel, which his books alter the fabric of reality and stuff like that. And he's like, no, you're going to do it. You have no choices. Did I tell you my favorite color is blue? And like Sam Neill wakes up and he's on a bus and everything is in a blue filter. And he just starts freaking out. He's just like, ah! And I think that was just like the end for her. It's just like this. I've had enough.
She noped right out of there. Nope, I got to get going.
What I liked about it too, though, was like, I mean, it really is a postmodern, but there's a lot of subtext to it.
Yeah,
because there's this thing like basically people are going crazy reading this guy's book. That's the premise. He's like, well, what if they don't read? There's a movie, like it's just and you're watching the movie. That's when the kind of meta narrative starts to unravel. But it's like
it'd be really funny if he looked right at the camera right there. Yeah,
they're going to get you.
And this is the last of Carpenter's what is known as the Apocalypse trilogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the thing, Prince of Darkness in this film.
Oh, and Prince of Darkness is magnificent too. It's a spooky film.
Yeah.
I mean, Alice Cooper as a homeless person. Jeez, what are you scarier than that? Going to Bible study with him, I guess.
And you had another one too, Jason, right?
Yeah. So the second film that we convinced her for, no, we'll watch a movie. We won't watch a horror movie this time. And after this one, she was like, I'm never watching movies with you two again. Is the 1984 Zucker Brothers and Abrams film, Top Secret.
Looking for a video that will make you laugh out loud? Then catch Val Kilmer in this undercover comedy where East meets West.
Wie Karl Baum in my Guten Worden-Liste. What the hell did you say to him? Nothing. I just told him I put his name on the Montgomery Ward mailing list.
Hillary.
Now, that's an unusual name.
It's a German name. It means she whose bosoms defy gravity.
It seems that you have become, how do you say, indispensable?
Indispensable? I'm not the first guy who fell in love with a girl he met in a restaurant who then turned out to be the daughter of a kidnapped scientist, only to lose her to her childhood lover who she'd last seen on a deserted island and who turned out 15 years later to be the leader of the French underground.
I know it. It all sounds like some bad movie.
When the creators of Airplane and The Naked Gun set out to make a spy spoof, the laughs fall hard on the East German High Command in Top Secret.
Now, if you don't know Zucker Brothers and Abrams, they're the guys who did the Airplane movie.
Mm-hmm.
They created the Police Squad TV show, which became the Naked Gun movies starring Leslie Nielsen. So it's a spoof movie. That's kind of their greatest genre, as far as I'm concerned. Forget all that Ghost and First Night and all that they did later. But it's Val Kilmer's first film. It's a mix of like old black and white World War II movies and Elvis films.
Indeed.
Yes. And Val Kilmer is playing this Elvis type character, Nick Rivers. And he sings all the songs in this film. Like they created
the songs
these
are bangers,
songs.
Actually.
They're really good. Yeah.
I love the music of this film.
It's got, to me, some of the best sight gags that they've ever done in any of their films, which is saying a lot because they've done some great gags.
I consider this film like I like it better than Airplane and Airplane 2. It's like film school in a can because there's so many of those visual jokes are dependent on the medium itself, like blocking and frames and stuff. Like there's a bit where they're crawling on the ground, army style, and they run into like you see these boots, and it cranes upwards. And you realize it's just a pair of boots. Like, obviously, they would have been able to see that, but us as the audience, and there's like a lot of forced perspective stuff that they do. And it's like, it really, like, if you watch it with a critical eye, you're like, man, there's a whole scene that they film backwards. The whole scene. It's a technical
marvel.
It's an incredibly well shot film on top of being like there's so many jokes that every time you watch it there's something new you uncover.
There is a like old Wild West saloon fight scene underwater. It's completely 100% underwater, and there's a saloon, there's a bartender, there's guys playing poker. Yeah.
I've never seen this. I'm gonna have to watch it.
My god, Top Secret is amazing. Don't watch it with your kids. I watched it like when it came out. I was born in 77, so I do the math. There's a
it was definitely a different era for what kids can watch back then, but
there's a joke that like as a kid I was like, I
have no idea what that is.
There's something that there's a world beyond what I know.
It was on that day that I hit puberty, and
but it's also the first film I remember seeing that was kind of like broke the fourth wall because because he's talking to his like re-explaining the plot. So he goes, I know it all sounds like it's just some bad movie. And they stop and they turn towards the camera. Man, as a kid, I was like, whoa! I'm like falling through like a wormhole or something.
Maybe we should do an episode this year on movies that really messed with our minds. That would be a good. I know you've got some. I've got some too. Like
we talked about Event Horizon,
the Da Vinci Code. It was a
Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown. from beginning to end, though, like it is just it's wonderful, and it spoofs so many other movies and genres. But like the wordplay, there's physical comedy, there's in camera kind of trickery. It's so smart for a dumb movie, which is what I love.
There's a bit they're breaking into this prison, and it makes no sense, but just flow with it. And they bring the cows in from the fields to be milked, and so they disguise themselves as cows to get in. So they put on a cow costume, and then the next scene, it's an actual cow that somebody's painted obvious fake black dots on, and then put boots on it. To represent them in a cow costume. It is brilliantly mad.
Two of my favorite jokes. The one is the guy's on the phone. He's inquiring about like the status of this officer that was attacked.
I didn't know who it was. I just saw him pull a gun on a girl.
Might I remind you, Mr. Rivers, that the penalty for murder is death by firing squad. Let us hope for your sake that Sergeant Kruger survives.
Yeah? It is the hospital, mein General.
What is the condition of Sergeant Kruger? Yes, I see. Well, let me know if there's any change in his condition. He's dead.
That is mine as well, man. I love that.
That's such... And the other... My favorite, honest to God, my favorite joke out of anything is they're torturing Nick Rivers trying to get this information out of him, and and nothing's working. He won't break. One East German says to the other, he says, should we bring out the Leroy Neiman paintings? And he says, no, we can't risk breaking the Geneva Convention. And I hate Leroy Neiman. It's such a just like off the wall. I mean, they could have substituted like who's the painting with light guy, Thomas Kincaid or something.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that like the Geneva Convention, there's like one line like you will not use Leroy Neiman in torture. Like.
I said the sight gags are just so brilliant. There's one like a phone's ringing and the phone's in the foreground, and the guys in the back, and the guy walks up to the phone, and instead of the perspective of the guy getting bigger in the phone, you can see it's small. It's this giant phone. Like he picks up the receiver, and it's almost as big as he is. It's just it is this brilliant, simple, stupid gag. And another one is they're like in a train, and they stop at a train station. They're supposed to be departing again, and you see the train station move, and then you realize it's this train station that's moving, not the train he's on.
And then there's like a tree in the background going the other way, and the guy's running to catch up and like jump on the tree that's moving. It's mind blowing. And it's got Omar Sharif in it.
Yeah.
Saying the
Peter
most...
Cushing, yeah.
Omar Sharif say, driver, this isn't the Howard Johnsons. For some reason, cracks me up. I don't know why. It's not a comedy line, but like...
No, it's hilarious.
They pull into like a junkyard, and his obvious like sincerity and confusion... It's not the East German Howard Johnson.
Another one of my favorite gags is like they're running from the police, and they like run outside, and there's this bicycle rack with all these bicycles on it, and Val Kilmer starts going "Hee-ah! Hee-ah!" and the bikes just like disembark like wild horses. It's just.
Well, now it's just us telling bits from a movie. Like maybe
I just it is so, and they admit like it didn't do as well. It's probably confusing because it was like this indiscernible time period, and it was more. It's a very loose plot with just joke after joke after joke. But that's what I love about this film. It's like you're laughing throughout the entire film.
It's simultaneously a World War II film and post-World War II Cold War film at the same time. And it's just whatever they need it to be. Like, they're in East Germany, and then sometimes it's just straight-up Nazi Germany. It's like that.
Much like this podcast, we just make up the rules as we go along. So, on that note...
Stream of consciousness.
It's one of my favorite movies, and like I said, of 84. And 84 is just such a magnificent year. Temple of Doom, Last Starfighter, one of my favorite, just like weird Walter Hill movies, Streets of Fire.
Oh yeah, it's a good movie too.
But then, just comedies. You've got Ghostbusters,
Beverly Hill Cop,
Gremlins. Yeah, also another just like great spoof, Johnny Dangerously. If you've never seen it, but
I haven't thought of that in a long time.
This is still my favorite out of all of that because it is just non-stop laughter. It makes you feel good to watch this film.
So, Josh, make us feel bad about a movie. What's on your list?
Oh, you want to feel bad about a movie? Let's talk about 1974's Zardoz.
I am Arthur Frayne, and I am Zardoz. I have lived 300 years, and I long to die, but death is no longer possible. I am immortal. I present now my story, full of mystery and intrigue, rich in irony and most satirical. It is set deep in a possible future, so none of these events have yet occurred. But they may. Be warned, lest you end as I. In this tale, I am a fake god by occupation and a magician by inclination. Merlin is my hero. I am the puppet master. I manipulate many of the characters and events you will see. But I'm invented, too, for your entertainment and amusement. And you, poor creatures, who conjured you out of the clay?
Never heard of it.
So, you're in for a treat. So, like, it's got Sean Connery, and this is
never mind. I have heard of this. Now that you said that.
So here's the thing about Zardoz.
It's like his first post-Bond film.
Yeah. He was looking for something to differentiate
He's
him from Bond.
He's got weird hair and a mustache in this, right? That's the...
John Boorman, I think, had lost rights to Lord of the Rings or something, and, like, something had gone down, and he was like, I'm doing Zardoz. And maybe it was after Excalibur.
No, it's long before Excalibur.
Okay. But Zardoz, like, is a bizarre... It's a film that, like, when you watch it, you're like, oh, this is terrible. This is really awful. But then later you're like, I think that was brilliant. Like, I don't know if they were trying to do that brilliance or if it was like it's some kind of idiot savant thing.
Tropic Thunder.
So it's like this post-apocalyptic world where, like, this floating head spews out AK-47s to the populace and tells them that the penis is evil and to, like, kill and murder. And so, like, that's like scene one.
Zardoz speaks to you, his chosen ones.
The chosen one!
You have been raised up from brutality to kill the brutals who multiply and are legion. To this end, Zardoz, your god, gave you the gift of the gun. The gun is good.
The gun is good!
The penis is evil. The penis shoots seeds and makes new life to poison the earth with a plague of men, as once it was. but the gun shoots death and purifies the earth of the filth of Bruckles. Go forth and kill.
We went into this completely blind the first time I saw it, and we were like, what? And so Sean Connery's character is like, I'm going to go kill these gods. And he like hops in the head and he goes to this place where there's all these immortal beings, right? They're immortal and they don't age. So how they punish these people in this society is they age them. Eventually you get so old you go to the old folks home. So the old folks home is full of all the rebels and ne'er-do-wells, but they're physically old.
That's funny. So
yes,
the bit is that he sees a god and his first human instinct is I'm going to kill the god.
Well, this is after the god's telling him like the penis
like
is
how
evil.
To be. Yeah,
like,
I got
wait a second.
This reminds me of
what kind of mind would say that?
This reminds me of a meme I saw where it was like, there's this new medication that it's a once a day pill that completely eliminates addictions, all kinds of addictions. The semaglutide, the weight loss and diabetes drug, has this effect on a lot of people too, but it's a real bit. But I saw the meme, it was like, the headline was new drug promises to end all addictions. And the first comment with 1,000 likes was, wonder what happens if you take 2. That's human instinct, right? See if we can break the system.
Zardoz lives in the realm of like Logan's Run and Dark Star, Barbarella. But it's one of these things that like the execution doesn't get there. They're limited by the technology of their time. But like
so if
some
they
of the
remade it today, could they do a good job?
Oh, no, they've never, because some of the ideas are
very 70s.
Very 70s, and also very dangerous ideas that are not really palatable to the masses at large. It was a pretty experimental film. It is ideas. So yeah, very, very 70s kind of philosophies. And John Boorman is a great director, which is weird. It's it's directed fine, but it's almost like somebody like Ed Wood possessed him for a film. It's got that vibe to it that like Plan 9 from Outer Space has all these great ideas, but just can't get to the execution. So over the years, I've watched Zardoz a couple of times now, and it's like, you're like, man, there's nothing like this. Like, at least it's something different, and it's trying to do, it's trying real hard to make a point, and what it does not succeed ultimately. But man,
you'll never forget it.
No, it is an experience, and I recommend it to people. Just, and they're like, why'd you make me watch it? I'm like, dude, will you ever forget Zardoz? And like, no, exactly. That's better than I can't remember I went and saw Wonka, and I couldn't tell you half of what happened in it because it was just so bland.
Once in a while, a movie like that comes on, Napoleon Dynamite comes to mind for me.
Yeah, it's almost like outsider art in a way. Yeah. It's just, it's so bizarre and it's so fevered. And also, I always root for when there's a film that has God, the thing's got a good foundation. It's just, you just built a house of cards on top of it.
As you once said to me, this movie would be better if it were better.
I ain't lying. Yeah. Past Josh has a lot of wisdom. We often look to past Josh for wisdom.
And we create problems for future Josh to solve. That's his problem.
Future Josh is a mess.
I feel sorry for that guy. I'd hate to be him.
This ain't a past Josh problem. This sounds like a future Josh problem.
He's writing checks future Josh can't cash.
And that's my philosophy, basically.
The thing about Zardoz is, like I said, I don't think it was a very successful movie, but it has been referenced a lot since then. It has made an indelible mark on cinema and on the people who took up the baton after that.
Right. It affected filmmakers. They saw it and said, I want people to remember my movie.
I don't know exactly what this is, but I do know that I will never forget it, and I want people to feel the same way about me.
I feel about Zardoz almost the same way I feel about The Pit. Like, they're just like these crazy films, and you laugh and kind of think, oh, this movie sucks, but then you're like, I carry this with me every day now. It has changed my life. I don't know how or why.
Would you be mad if I watched this with the riff tracks over top of it for the first time?
I would highly, I've not seen the riff tracks version of it. I would highly dissuade you from that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Experience it for yourself.
A pure version.
It as it should. It's and it's like Miami Connection. The first time I watched Miami Connection was with the riff tracks. And I was like, and then I watched it without, and it was a much better experience.
Go ahead, do another one.
How do I follow that? So 1994, another great year of film. This is not my favorite film. It's a good film. It's like, I would say this is like the apex predator of the Air Force One style film.
The one that ate the rest.
And also, I feel like this was like the last hurrah of this type of fare, the kind of action comedy. Like, the internet, I think, ruined this kind of film, because if it came out now, people are like, Harrier jets can't act like that in real life, and there'd be like hours upon hours of YouTube people talking crap about the film. The film I'm referring to is Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Tom Arnold in True Lies.
How'd it go at the convention, honey?
You were the big hit of the show. It's fantastic. I love the computer business.
For 15 years, Harry Tasker's been leading a double life.
Mr. President, one of our best men is inside. Transmitting now.
Right on time.
I don't believe I've met you before.
Rehnquist. Harry Rehnquist.
Listen to the following code word. Helen. Helen.
Now, they're about to collide.
What's your exit strategy?
I'm gonna walk right out of the front gate.
May I see your invitation, please?
Sure. Here's my invitation.
Yeah, that worked good. Right out the old front gate.
Can you back a second?
Mr. Tasker's office.
Hi, it's Helen. Is he in?
Harry's in a sales meeting, Mrs. Tasker.
It's not like he's saving the world or anything.
See, this is the problem with terrorists. They're really inconsiderate when it comes to people's schedules. Could you press the button for the top floor, please?
Hi, Helen. Harry forgot something back at the office.
Whenever I can't sleep, I just ask him to tell me about his day. 6 seconds and I'm out.
Maybe it's just that you're not in touch with your feminine side.
Harry! What were you doing there?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you. You know what this is? It's a snow cone maker. Is it a water heater?
From James Cameron, director of Aliens and T2. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's a Soviet Mirv 6 from an SS-22N launch vehicle.
I married Rambo.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Have you ever killed anyone?
Yeah, but they were all bad.
True Lies.
What can I say? I'm a spy.
It's incredibly fun.
That's why, like, I even like, despite all the whatever, like, if it came, to your point about the internet destroying or whatever, I think the funness of it would kind of overcome that in my mind.
You would think, but the internet doesn't forgive. Everything's got to be too, like, realistic now. It's a fun take on the spy genre and kind of the screwball comedy in a lot of ways. Yeah. Mixed very well into an action film. So it's one of those films that, like, you're like, wow, that's really of its time. Like, that's okay.
Because
it dates it, but not in a bad way.
Almost like a period piece.
The weird thing about this is it's James Cameron.
Yeah.
And it's almost like James Cameron, like, slumming it to an extent, because I mean he's done action and everything before, but there's always been, like,
gravitas
with Terminators and the Aliens movie, there's yet still been like this undercurrent of like almost intellectualism and everything, and that's not and that's not really here, and it's not that it's a bad thing. It's him doing comedy, which is very un-James Cameron. If you've talked to anybody who's known James Cameron.
I can't think of any other film. I mean, other like Piranha 2, but that doesn't even really count because it's like
that was money.
You're a gun for hire at that point. But like when at this point, like he's not just some guy. He's James Cameron, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Schwarzenegger, like, man, he and Sly get a lot of crap in the pop culture, but those guys, they're self-aware, they're smart guys, they're good at what they do. And Schwarzenegger, what I appreciate about him is he's not afraid. Like, he pushed the boundaries of what he could do.
Yeah, grew as an actor. We watched him grow as an actor.
Right.
Yeah.
I see a lot of that in like Dave Bautista now,
Yeah, that's
like,
a good example.
Like that he pushed, like he doesn't want, like, I'm a big swole dude, but that doesn't mean I can't do comedy or something serious.
Drama.
Yeah. And he's proved, I think ultimately he may end up being, he certainly is a better actor than Schwarzenegger, but I mean, Schwarzenegger is the template for that. When you saw stuff like Terminator and then like, my next movie is, and everybody does like a terrible Schwarzenegger, which like shows you how insanely successful he is. No, I won't call him up. Arnold, I need you to talk about this thing we talked about. Okay, Joshua.
As soon as the money is out of escrow.
This was a super fantastic movie. Twins. Me and Danny DeVito are twins, but he's little and I am big. Like,
of all the Arnold Schwarzenegger impressions I've ever heard, that is easily in the bottom 3.
Let me tell you, just as a side, something I've actually seen just in the past few days. You know who does like just an impeccable spot on Schwarzenegger impersonation? Robert Davi.
Really?
Yes, like I saw him. I can't remember what it was, but he was doing some like radio show interview, and he was talking about like Arnold Schwarzenegger went with him to see Die Hard, and he was just talking about like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, and he was dead on. He sounded exactly like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I was going to do this movie, but I couldn't fit in the air vents.
So, I like a good trivia statement. So, according to the internet here, it says True Lies was the very first film to cost $100 million. So,
well, I mean, that's not outside of like James Cameron. What he does, like Terminator 2 was the most expensive movie up to that time, and then he followed it up with this, and then he did Titanic,
and then Avatar, and then it's like, what is the highest anybody's ever spent on a movie? What is the current James Cameron movie? Or the same question?
Yeah.
The guy likes to spend money, but unlike some of these $250 million movies or whatever that's come out lately,
he's printing cash basically. Yeah.
You also see it on the screen, like like it's
where
like
did the money go? Oh, there it is. Yeah, it's
oh my god, they blew up a city block. Okay,
it's
that
no
probably
Thor:
costs.
Love and Thunder, where you're like, you spent how much on this?
You filmed this all on a green screen in like a warehouse in Atlanta, and it cost how much?
Well, and the CGI looks like this.
Right.
Yeah.
This costs more than the original Star Wars.
And that's something you'll never see in a James Cameron is like bad special effects.
Right.
No,
like
because he
is
kills
notorious.
the special effects people that fail him. He's the Palpatine of special effects people.
He eats them and absorbs their energy.
True Lies is honestly, it's one of those films that like everybody is just so good in it, and it was so well cast. Like Tom Arnold, like is perfect in that kind of role, as he is like the platonic ideal of the schlubby B character. Yeah. Like he's just absolutely perfect. Put him in the lead role, like in the Stupids, and God help us all. Like it's a national tragedy. But
it's mentioned in the Geneva Convention.
There was a lot of like hoopla about Jamie Lee Curtis's kind of lewd and lascivious dance that she does, and there's a body double. And
the main thing that happened was like they were upset that Tia Carrere was cast as the villainess because she was Asian. Like, oh, that's a typical stereotype. And then Jamie Lee Curtis, like, I thought they'd be more offended by my striptease. That was the exact quote on that.
I remember hullabaloo about that, and it was like there was two sides of it because there was a lot of she was like 40 maybe or something, and they're like, oh, look at the body, you know. There was a lot of objectification, and there was also like the whole like, I can't believe a woman her age looks so good, and it's like, guys, let's we're treading down paths that we were not meant to. But in any case, that is a good scene. I ain't gonna lie.
Like I said, it's a fun movie. Everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody's playing it with a wink and a nod. I think one of my favorite bits is when the truth serum into Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's a trope, but Arnold Schwarzenegger plays those tropes so well. The action movie tropes, like.
Is there anything you want to tell me before we start?
Yeah. I'm going to kill you pretty soon.
I see. How exactly?
First, I'm going to use you as a human shield. Then I'm going to kill this guard over there with the Patterson trocar on the table. And then I was thinking about breaking your neck.
And what makes you think you can do all that?
You know my handcuffs? I picked them.
It's never not amusing when Arnold Schwarzenegger does that. He does it in like 50% of his movies.
No, yeah, Schwarzenegger is an outlier, and also like we talked about, like he's inexplicable. Like if you looked at it on paper, he should not have been the biggest star in the world, and yet somehow, hit after hit, and
then he became governor.
Right, like he has the most improbable life ever. If you look at Hercules go in New York or whatever, like, that guy is going to one day be like a political powerhouse after he's like been in the #1 box office hit year after year. Like, I don't know about that, man.
Yeah, I think it's also probably like the last great action movie of that genre. Not just the action comedy, but just of that action movie that became very popular in the 80s and the early 90s. Like, this is really the last truly great example of that. Everything that comes after it just
it really feels like capstone to an era. It really, because it's a bit of a love letter. It's also like just emblematic of the genre, and it fires on all cylinders. It's, you know, and we're talking about 20 years later, I think people will watch this film for a long time. I'm not going to say it's a perfect film. It perfectly executes what it wanted to.
Yeah. This might be like Schwarzenegger's last really successful film at that point, because I don't think anything that came after it was ever really at the same level of his previous work.
Yeah, it was weird that it was a phenomenon. It transcended like age and stuff, because like my parents liked it as much as I liked it. You know, like Adam probably the one like, I hated that movie.
No, I just said it was a good movie.
God, stop hating on it, Adam.
I will point out that
enjoy it all the time.
I will point out it was 30 years ago, not 20. But
no, it was 20 years ago.
When did the movie come out?
20 years ago. Shut up.
You were born in what year? That's future Josh's problem.
Past Josh was born in a more elegant time.
That's right. We'll watch his career with interest.
He didn't do anything with his life after all.
Turns out it wasn't worth watching.
Started a podcast. That was terrible.
Opened an unsuccessful chain of papaya restaurants.
He did turn me on to Zardoz. There was that. But.
I'd like to talk about a movie that I was pleasantly
Sorry, we're out of time.
You're going to start playing the wrap-up music now. I would like
the orchestra comes in right now.
A literal hook around my neck dragging me off the stage.
We got that clown from the Apollo Theater.
It is a 1964 movie. So this is kind of like a Josh thing where I watched this movie at the perfect time in my life. I think I was 13 the first time I saw this movie.
When you were a colonial British officer?
When I was a colonial British officer. Again, to stereotype here, but I think every like teenage kid boy goes through this like war movie phase, right? And I caught this on TV, I think.
Probably TBS.
And yeah. But I remember it was like late, and I remember there was no commercial cuts. I just saw it all the way through. In any case, maybe we rented it from the local store or something. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I'm talking about the movie Zulu.
Dwarfing the mightiest. Towering over the greatest. Joseph E. Levine presents Zulu. These are the days and nights of fury and honor, of courage and cowardice that an entire century of empire making and filmmaking can never surpass. This is the day when 200 Zulu maidens and 200 Zulu warriors perform their incredible mass wedding dance. This is the day when a woman fights for her honor, among men fighting for their lives.
You're all going to die! Die!
Zulu. This is a day and night of death and defiance, when 100 gallant men were outnumbered by the mightiest warrior nation on earth, but not outfought. Zulu. A day that made history. Zulu.
It's a British epic war film. It's about this battle between the British Army and the African Zulu tribe. And it's a real battle called the Battle of Rorke's Drift. The way I sometimes described it to people was it's kind of like the British Alamo, except the British were successful. It's this insurmountable odds. It was 150 British soldiers against like 4,000 or 5,000 Zulu tribesmen, warriors.
That would be more like the British Thermopylae then.
Yeah,
or
that's fair.
Helm's Deep or Rio Bravo or
whatever. But what was fascinating about this, so just to address sort of a modern criticism up front, in the early 2000s, there was sort of this trend in the criticism and the review of this, because this is a movie that actually does appear in film school, allegedly. I don't know if that's true or not, but it was a movie that was important, especially for British film. There was some criticism of whether or not these depictions of colonialism were like imperialist or racist. I kind of did a little bit of research around this because I wanted to make sure I addressed it in a correct way. There's a couple points here. First, all of the extras in the movie are, in fact, locals. They're the Zulus, and they're the descendants of the people who lived there at the time, which is fascinating. And they engaged with the chief at that time to make sure that the director and the writers and the staff, they gave them agency in the way they were depicted, and they showed them dailies. They wanted to make it respectful and authentic as best they could to the way that the history of this battle had been presented from their side. The way the tribe was passed through is through a male descendancy. In 2018, the current tribe of the Zulu, or the chief of the Zulu tribe, a man named I'll try my best here, Mangasutu Buthelezi, had this to say about that, and he said, "The cultural and historical merits of the movie show a deep respect that develops between the warring armies and the nobility of King Katsawa, who was the king that was depicted at the time. his warriors as they salute the enemy and demanded a different way of thinking from the average viewer at the time of the film's release, and remains a film that demands a thoughtful response. They show it still in Zulu culture as like a pride. Like, so they, I think that's important to give it some context here, right?
Yeah, because of the nature of the conflict and the outcome. And let's be frank, many films about war are not
kind to the one-sided.
Right. They other the enemy very well, right. And to hear that they were aware of that in what was it, 64?
Yeah,
that's incredible. Even if they failed by modern standards, they were giving effort that most films wouldn't. Like, I don't think that films around that time that depicted the Japanese theater in World War II or the Korean War would
Very
have,
racist. Yeah,
would not have been like, well, let's see.
Objectively, even then, that was openly,
it's not like Flags of Our Fathers and Iwo Jima, which were like the same battle depicted from each
different
side.
sides,
It sounds like this was in that mode, which even today, unfortunately, I think is not the standard.
Yeah.
Well, I think at the time also, like in apartheid South Africa,
right?
The black audience was not allowed to watch it because
I was going to mention that. Yeah,
that it would incite them to riot and revolt.
Yeah, that's true. The only people in apartheid South Africa who were allowed to see the film contemporaneously were those who were in the film. They had a special screening for them and their families so they could see themselves in a movie. It was only released to the white audiences in apartheid South Africa, which is amazing, right? Interestingly, I know, and I didn't independently verify this, but the wiki article on this mentions that there was an allegation that the extras weren't paid, that they were paid in cattle that were used in the film or whatever. And that, because there's a lot of like animals used in the movie, and that's totally false. Like, they were actually paid the same as the white extras were, and they were paid the standard rate, even though that actually I did look this up. There's some problems about how to pay, like, because it was apartheid, the film producers had to find a way around that rule so they could in fact pay day wages at the regular rate, because it was contravened by the local laws essentially. And they went out of their ways to kind of like circumvent that. In a lot of ways, it was a revolutionary film in the way that it treated race relations in apartheid South Africa.
Incredibly progressive.
And I believe also an early film for Michael Caine.
It was his very first film, actually.
My cocaine is in in every film I do.
Yeah,
I always have my cocaine handy.
It's nice, Michael Caine.
A lot quicker than your previous jabs. I'll give you that.
That's the whole thing. Is like Michael Caine says his name like you're saying my cocaine.
He doesn't say it like I'm saying my cocaine.
It's interesting
because are you talking about my cocaine.
Just keep saying it; it'll get funnier.
Intrepidly, I will.
That is the core of Josh's sense of humor.
Which is why I don't understand why he doesn't like my intrepid joke at the beginning of these films.
I don't like when people turn my own weapons against me. Jeez, I mean.
It's only funny when I do it, right?
Only at the expense of other people.
Now I understand.
That is the second pillar of Josh's sense of humor.
The three pillars, yes.
I put this up on the big screen. I will say a couple points. The effects are not great, and even by the standards of the time. Like, there's a lot of like, you stab a guy in the heart and you can see the blade retract. Like it's like almost like stage acting is the way it really looks. That's the only criticism. I always said that up front because I want to say what is really cool is because they used locals, they let them kind of write their own part, if that makes sense. There's a lot of like elements of singing and music and war cries that they do that once you hear it, it's one of those things that's indelible. Like, I remember being 13 and hearing those chants that they do in the movie. There's two versions. There's one where they're doing the threatening version, and then the movie ends. It's a pitched battle, right? So there's, in the real world, it was like almost 5,000 against these 150 men. In the movie, even the extras, there was over 1,200 men and the extras that were actually there doing this. And they sing this male chorus, this war cry.
They're taunting us. You couldn't be more wrong. They're saluting you. They're saluting fellow braves. They're saluting you.
And I had it on the surround sound. I had it cranked all the way up, and they do this. They slam against their shields with their spears. The audio mixing of this movie is fantastic. I was amazed at how, I don't know if it's been remixed since then or whatever, but the sound quality was incredible, and the way the voices carry through, really cool. Just stellar.
It's interesting that, I think as of recording today, Marvel's Echo has not come out yet, but I just saw a behind the scenes where the director, showrunner stuff, that they really engaged with the tribe to be like, you tell us how this works.
Neat. Okay.
And of course, there was some grumbling in the YouTube sphere. They're like, well, that's leaving out the creative choice of the director stuff. It's like, no, that's the creative choice of the director, is to ask the people that it is representing, tell me how to be authentic. Like that.
They were on set to make sure the costuming,
that's cool,
hair, everything, every last detail was correct.
Another interesting thing is the lead actress in Echo is deaf. The director talked about, so she talks with American Sign Language, and so our close-ups of her were basically mid-shots because you had to have at least mid-torso up so you could see her hands. And she said, so that became our default close-up
for everybody
throughout the series because, even if you don't speak ASL, that's the
defining part of the
right. And I was like, man, that's a really interesting, inclusive choice, and it makes sense story wise. It wasn't just cultural sensitivity, but it was like, let's make sure we know what we're talking about before we do this.
Let's be honest in the depiction.
Right.
They've also dubbed it in the Choctaw language, which is interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I guess this is a good, I'll do my last thing here. This is actually a good way. We have a mutual friend who is first night or first weekend of every Marvel movie that's ever been made, literally. I think he considers himself a super fan, or at least a super critic. These late ones anyway.
He's ensorcelled by Marvel.
I am a person who is I would very much consider myself a casual fan. And in fact, for the majority of them, I'm with you, Josh, where I'm like, I can remember highs and lows of some parts of these films, but overall I couldn't tell you a whole lot of several of the Marvel movies. I've seen them all.
You're a filthy casual.
I'm a filthy casual. But there is one, and it came out in 2014, and it is a favorite.
Along with 8 other Marvel movies.
and 20 TV shows. Right. Yeah, no. It's a film that's
novels.
All of which you had to read before you could go see this movie. It's a favorite in our house, one of my top favorite Marvel movies, which is Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one.
Drop it now!
Yeah, hey, cool, man. No problem. No problem at all.
Who are you?
Star-Lord.
Who?
Well, Star-Lord, man. Legendary outlaw. Forget it.
We arrested these 5 on Xandar. Check out the rap sheets. Drax, a.k.a. the Destroyer. Since his wife and family were killed, he's been on a rampage across the galaxy in his search for vengeance. Gamora, soldier, assassin, wanted on over a dozen counts of murder. Rocket, wanted on over 50 charges of vehicular theft and escape from lockup.
What the hell?
Groot, that's been traveling recently is Rocket's personal houseplant / muscle. Peter Jason Quill. He's also known as Star-Lord.
Who calls him that?
Himself, mostly. He's wanted largely on charges of minor assault, public intoxication, and fraud.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know how this machine worked. Hey, that's mine. You son of a... Hey, take those headphones off right now!
They call themselves the Guardians of the Galaxy.
What a bunch of a-holes.
Hooked on a feeling. I'm high on believing.
You know, I don't say a lot of good things about Marvel stuff, but, you know, on the heels of what you guys just said, I think...
They got actual aliens to make sure that the movie was honest in its depiction of aliens.
They shot it in space.
I don't think Dave Bautista likes to be called that, but I think that's culturally insensitive. But to your point, Dave Bautista's in it, which earlier when you mentioned him, it made me think of this too. It's a fun movie. It's what the first Iron Man was. It gets into
Marvel's weirder side.
Yeah.
It gets into the cosmic stuff.
It doesn't take itself seriously. It's not.
Yeah.
The brilliance of the film is that it took the cultural cachet that the prior films had built. You know, it really asked a lot of the audience, because it was even as a comic book, I would consider myself a kind of a comic book nerd when I was younger. I knew Adam Warlock. I kind of knew most of the characters, but I was not a big Nova Corps and all that stuff kind of fan. So it's not even B team or C team. This is like D team superheroes.
It's almost obscure.
Right. I wouldn't even say almost. It was obscure.
No, it's not obscure. Eternals is obscure.
Fair point. Fair point. But so you built all this cachet, and then it's like they were like, "Please just take this risk with us," and it paid off.
I agree.
And because I was like, when I saw the trailer, I was like, "Oh God, it's over." I was like, "It's absolutely over." I said, I will probably love it. I said, general audiences are not going to, Rocket Raccoon is not going to go over. And now, like Groot and Rocket Raccoon and Gamora, Thanos and stuff, like these are all like literal household names. Like James Gunn, I mean, he's like the guy, the magician that like rips the tablecloth out and none of the stuff moves. How'd you do that? That's what Guardians of the Galaxy was.
Yes.
I don't know. It was a perfect storm, and he just executed it so well. Very good script.
Yes.
Music was perfect. The tack that he took. What was weird is I think it was obscure enough that even like the hardcore nerds couldn't be
get mad.
Well, yeah. Well, that's not how. It's like how many Rocket Raccoon comics have you read? None.
Yeah. I agree, and they couldn't review bomb it off the bat because of crap as a filthy casual. I almost liked it because I didn't feel like my associates are people like you and our mutual friend who every time
sounded like that was a bit of an insult.
It is. Please take it in the spirit as it was meant, which is that when a new Marvel movie comes out, invariably I hear about how it's different than the comics, or it's not in the spirit of whatever the artist originally wanted, or whatever. I don't care about any of that crap. I don't have that deep well. Like I was never a comic book kid. I feel like this one existed in a sort of a vessel of its own.
Yes.
That it was like a movie more than it was a comic book movie.
Yeah, agreed. I'd say that carried through all three of the films.
Yes.
Is that they were pretty self-contained. They were about something rather than I think the failure of Marvel lately is like
building on a thing.
You're setting up the dominoes, but you never get to see the domino get knocked down and all of them ride around. So it's like nobody likes watching the dominoes get set up. It's boring.
Right. So anyway, I mean, we don't have to beat a dead horse. I think everybody's probably seen this movie. Those three, I think all three of them are pretty good, honestly. If I got to watch a Marvel movie and I get to choose what it is, it's going to be this. That's what I would say.
John C. Reilly, like,
yes,
he is more precious than gold. He's so perfect in that. Like his delivery when like Rocket says something like, "We take it like murder," you're like, "That's murder. It's like the worst thing you could do." His line delivery is just like it's like they took his character from Ricky Bobby from and threw him in a space Marvel film. It's like the same character. It's beautiful.
And I don't understand how the writing could be so crisp and tight on this. If you just read this as a script, even if you didn't see it on film, if you just read it as a script with the show notes, it's just a dialogue snappy. The jokes are funny. It's just a good movie. I mean,
let's not forget like the most important thing, that somehow Glenn Close is in this movie.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Chris Pratt was the fat guy on
Parks and Rec.
And like when he got the job, like James Gunn's like, "I want you for this," and you're have to do all this training. He's like, "Well, if I don't lose the weight and get cut and stuff," he goes, "I guess Star-Lord's gonna be fat because you're gonna be in this movie." But I think like James Gunn just had that much of he just knew what he wanted.
How? I have a plan. You've got a plan. Yes. I don't even believe you have a plan. I have part of a plan.
What percentage of a plan do you have?
I don't know. 12%. 12%?
His brother's funny too. Like,
yes.
You know.
But for all the good and ill the explosion of Chris Pratt has caused in the world,
yeah,
like it's both. He has created good and evil in this world. Like
sometimes at the same time.
Yes, James Gunn chose him and lifted him out of the muck of sitcom television, and brought him forth to the world.
Well, it's been another hour or so with us here at the Brick Pit, and we hope it's been time well spent for you.
I think that history will judge these as like truly the fireside chats of the 21st century.
These really moved the needle on the socio zeitgeist.
Through these hard times, people will remember sitting down. Like, I remember when I didn't have a job and inflation was crazy. There was war all over the world, but these jackasses kept talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, and I realized I could be them.
When people look back and there's only one set of footprints in the sand, that's because we were carrying them.
You were carrying the Brick Pit.
That's right.
The footprints were you.
Yeah. If you find that blasphemous, please write to us at brickpit@gmail.com or find us on social media by searching for the Brick Pit Podcast. And if you'd like to leave us a voicemail and tell us how much you hate the show and how wrong we are on everything we say, we'd love to hear that. You can go to anchor.fm/brickpit, where you can find an option to upload a voicemail, or you can send us one through Facebook using the record function in the messages, and we'll use that as well. Until next time, this is the Brick Pit. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it.